Oh, thanks very much, Karen.
Good evening, one and all, wherever you are in the world. I'm talking to you from Dubai, United Arab Emirates. I'm Rob Ford, one of the members of the membership committee. And this evening, we're going to have a conversation regarding invisible leaders managing back to the office. Today's session is recorded, as you'll have just heard through the message that was just provided. And we welcome members of the worshipful company of company secretaries and administrators, and of those of you that are joining us from outside of the company, we welcome you. Just some housekeeping tips: if you're not asking any questions, if you could please mute your microphones, and if you have questions that come up during the panel discussion or conversation, please feel free to put them into the chat area, and we'll try and get to all of your questions. At the end of the session, we will be having an informal Q&A, and then we'll close the meeting, but allow people to stay on for another 15-20 minutes just to discuss network and consider some of the topics. For those of you that are members of the company, I would like to remind you that there is an installation dinner on the 13th of October, and tickets will go on sale very, very soon. So please come along and support the new master.
What date?
So on the 13th of October.
I think it's the 15th. Otherwise, I'm attending on the wrong day.
No, the installation is on the 13th of October. Banquet
sorry.
on the 15th.
I'm getting confused with the banquet. I'm not listening. Rob, I sincerely apologize. I thought we had a confusion. I'm confused and blonde.
That's okay. That's the beauty of technology. Hopefully that can be edited out. So I'm going to introduce our distinguished and experienced panel members. They have kindly offered to join us today. We've got Lynn Koloff, the company secretary of Wincanton PLC. She's been there since April 2020, so will have been onboarded during the lockdown. Before that, she was with Cobham PLC for 10 years. She's a qualified company secretary and predominantly worked in financial services before joining Cobham. She is a member of the ICSA Forum and also the Governance Institute, and worked for the FSA, now the Financial Conduct Authority. So we're very pleased to have Lynn with us. We also have Jane Gunn, an expert in conflict resolution. We all need to know somebody like Jane, because we all get into conflict at some point in our career and our life. She's also a trained mediator and facilitator known as the Barefoot Mediator, and you can ask her later what that's all about. She's chair of the board of management at the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and formerly director and board member of the Civil Mediation Council of England and Wales. Author of 2 books and regular speaker who has spoken at the UN, the White House, and the European Commission. She's worked for organizations such as National Health Service, Cable Wireless, and others, and her style is interactive and fun. Last but not least, we have Cobus van der Walt, who is also a committee member. He has been with South African energy and chemicals company Sasol since 2001 in various capacities: legal, commercial, governance and compliance, and management positions. He is a fellow of the Chartered Governance Institute and a solicitor of England and Wales, attorney, notary public, and conveyancer of the High Court of South Africa. Cobus was recently responsible for the oversight and management of Sasol's UK office move and involved in supporting the local team's return to the office following COVID-19 lockdown since March 2020. He is an avid golfer and loves visiting the many castles across the United Kingdom. And I'll now hand over to the chairperson of the membership committee, Sharon Constanson. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate your efforts. I think most of you know who I am. I look at one or two faces that may not know my name, but or seen my face, but you're going to see it now. Yes, I'm on the court of the Wishful Company. I've been a member for many number of years now, and chairman of the membership committee as of about 18 months ago. Well, that must be a year ago now. So we're responsible for making sure we get enough members into the livery company to make the livery company sustainable, but also the part of what COVID has brought to us is the ability to be relevant to members and to use this forum to invite future possible members to the livery company. Livery company is great fun. I have to say I enjoy every moment of it. I've met some really, really good friends in this environment. So any of you, and I know one of our guests is we're going to be chatting to her shortly in this connection. So thank you very much. So we have another South African potentially who might join us. Those Quibus, yourself and Nyambura, we're going to take over this crowd at this rate. We've got a couple of other South Africans that, yeah, one or two others, not many of us. If I speak to people in the city, and I know Fiona, you're in Canary Wharf, but if we look at what's been happening in the city of London, I know the sheriffs are going on a walkabout, drive about to key places around the city in a week or so time. And the focus being come back to the city alive and well, and just to try and create that energy. Chatting to one of my colleagues on Monday, yesterday morning, goodness, I don't even know what day of the week it is. This morning I was chatting to one of the big 5 Magic Circle legal firms, lady in business development. She's saying, I don't know what's happened, but everyone's in the office today. It's just out of nowhere. They're people. I haven't seen so many people for literally over a year. So they're starting to see things coming back to normal. What we are seeing in their environment is, yes, we're coming back to our desks, but we're not so sure about inviting people in, having people to meeting rooms, having functions. This is where some of the challenges are going to be coming up as well. So I will be asking our guests along those kind of lines as well. Jane, I'd like to start with you because everyone doesn't need to listen to me. We came to listen to the 4 of you. Is how many days a week do you feel that people should come to the office that either de-risks the business, helps their well-being, creates the culture, retains the culture? I was talking to a crowd today. We were talking about this is a board. Some of the board members have not met each other yet, and they feel like robots that have had their brains taken out. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm communicating, but I don't have a brain. I don't have any feeling. Mm-hmm. I don't have any emotion. I can't touch you. I don't know who you are. Mm-hmm. Please share that with us, please, Jane.
It's a challenge, isn't it? So, actually, both my daughters at the moment are on maternity leave. One's a GP and the other's a planning consultant. And certainly both of them have challenges, I suppose. The GP has had to see all her patients on Zoom. The planning consultant now has 2 children, and there's a dilemma, isn't there, between, it's been quite comfortable being at home, not having to get dressed up, not having to worry about the journey into work for my daughter, not having to worry about, I've got to run to the nursery and then I've got to run to the train and so on. So we've had some benefits. And then, as you say, Sharon, we've had some disadvantages in that we're disconnected. And it's the disconnect, the human disconnect, I think, that we're struggling with. And certainly some of my clients have said to me, what we're finding is that we'll have meetings on Zoom, but we find they're very functional. We don't find they connect us as human beings in the way we would if we were all in a room together, and we can see that this evening. One of the questions I often ask people when I run a workshop is, how tall do you think I am? So, you can guess, people could guess now how tall. I'll ask you, how tall, those who are watching, how tall do you think I am? Because we don't get that sense of the full person. You know, I'm in a box on your screen, and you don't see all of me, and you can't look properly into my eyes. So we're missing that sense of things. And so I think the answer is, Sharon, it depends, but we have to understand what we're missing and what we're gaining. And then we have to make a balanced choice, or even we've got to agree with our staff, you know, what do people, what are their reluctances? What are the benefits of them not being in versus the benefits of being in? And work out a balanced approach that works for everybody. But bearing in mind, you know, some people, and again, I think, you know, when you've had a time away from something, going back to it is, again, it's creating. So from my perspective as a conflict resolver, you've got internal conflicts going on. I feel less comfortable about doing my journey going into the office. So we've got feelings that people have built up, may have some concerns about safety. And then we've got, you know, other conflicts about, you know, we don't all agree. We don't all see this thing the same way. Some of us want to come in 5 days a week. Some of us want to come in 3 days a week. Some of us don't want to come back at all. So those are some of the dilemmas, I think, you know, and then thinking about, well, what are the risks and benefits? And it has to be a decision-making process that an organization has got to go through to work out the right answer to that question.
Just carrying that thought, you say each environment is unique. Each person in their team and company is unique. Lynn, in your space in Wincanton, to what extent have the individuals been engaged in the decision-making process, and to what extent are you open to their ideas and trying to create a varied model?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very difficult question to answer, because we've got over 20,000 colleagues. So, you know, actually communicating with each of those members, of those colleagues, is actually quite difficult for us. But actually we can split our company probably into two different arenas, because we've got a lot of our colleagues that are actually in warehouses or drivers on the road, or on building sites or in other logistics environments where we haven't actually stopped business. In fact, it's become more important that we continue our business. Otherwise, people just won't get fed. We are the logistics provider to a lot of our big grocery stores, and a lot of the big like B&Q in the UK is quite a big DIY business. That business has just gone through the roof while people were on lockdown. Lots of people were doing their DIY. They needed to get their equipment and their stuff that they wanted to actually use to do their DIY. As I say, the grocery stores, we've got to keep those warehouses working so that we could actually, keep the country going effectively. And also, we've seen a lot of other business come into us because of the situation. We've been doing a lot of the deliveries for the PPE equipment. And then also for Brexit, we've been doing border control. So most of our business actually has just had to keep going. And more of the challenge for us has been around how do we get the numbers of people to keep the business going. And in certain situations, we've actually had to increase the number of staff that we've got. And, a lot of it permanent, but quite a number of the colleagues that we've had to take on board have also been provided by agencies for us as well. So it's been quite interesting. So that's the first part of the business, and that's probably the biggest part in terms of numbers. The other side of it is obviously the head office facility. And we don't have a dedicated head office as such. We have a number of people that work out of an office in Chippenham. And then we have lots of people who drop into different locations that we operate through the country. So we've got 160 locations. Now, where those locations have been customer focused locations, we've not been able to dictate whether we can have meetings there. It's very much the customer's policy that we've had to follow. So we've had to work hand in hand with all of our customers, all of our clients, to actually make sure that we're doing what they want to do for their employees as well as our own. And also for the environments that we do have control, we have some shared user units, which are Wincanton owned units. We've been very, very conscious that first and foremost, we've got to keep our staff and our colleagues very safe. So that's been at the top of our agenda, really. And in those sort of situations where we can dictate what the policy is around people coming onto site, what the protocol is, we have talked to our colleagues about what they want to see, how comfortable they feel with people coming into site. So there's been a lot of engagement around the process as well. In terms of my own team, I've got a number of teams that I am involved with. So I've got my own personal team, which looks after the governance, compliance areas of business. We are 16 strong and we work primarily out of the Chippenham office. But actually, we've decided we don't need to go back into the office. We can be more efficient actually on Teams. We use Teams rather than Zoom. We do talk to each other quite regularly. Yes, it's over Teams, but we've also committed to meeting up face to face once every 6 weeks at least, to keep the sort of like the team spirit going, to keep our little culture going. And we've had quite a number of people start in that period as well. So we've got to get our new starters into our environment and comfortable with that environment. So that's my one team. The other one is obviously the board. The board have been very interesting. I think somebody mentioned earlier, you know, some of their board members just hadn't met. We've had 2 new board members who we've literally gone back to face-to-face board meetings from July. We had a board meeting yesterday. What I'm finding is actually it's difficult to fit the travel time now into the schedule because everybody's got used to working, you know, and flitting between meetings. If you've actually got to be in a physical environment, it's actually quite difficult to work out how do we get that travel time fixed into a diary that's already chock-a-block with other things. And then my third team is the exec management team, and we've been meeting face to face throughout because we found it's really important that we keep our contact going because we are managing the business effectively. And we've been going to different sites, primarily Wincanton sites, a couple of customer sites, but we've been going to customer sites where we've got, Wincanton sites, where we've got big office space that we can actually, you know, observe the social distancing. We've obviously been testing as well. A couple of the exec team have come down with COVID as well, and we've just had to manage around that. So it's, yeah, been a very interesting time and lots of different challenges. Has that answered the question for you?
Yes, absolutely. You've been amazing. No, thanks. That was a lot of depth that you gave us. Quib was just picking up on Lynn talking about the logistics and you getting petrol to forecourts or diesel, whatever it is you're doing, moving around the actual commodity itself. But also you have a very big head office that you have recently moved into in the Johannesburg area or Sandton area. And you were sharing some insights into the challenges that has brought to you. Do you want to share that with us first? Because it's quite uniquely different to anything that has just been shared.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Sharon. And thank you again for the opportunity to participate. So Sasol is a company of about 30,000 staff. Its head office is based in Johannesburg. And we recently, as in the past 3 or 4 years, moved into a brand spanking shiny new head office, which we built ourselves. And then obviously COVID promptly struck. Now, if you have a building 10 floors high, 10 stories high, with space for 3,500 people, to see that totally empty all of a sudden is quite an experience. And we had to pretty much shut down the entire building, mothball it. There were very, very low attendance. And what we found recently with COVID starting to become less of an issue is that there's definitely studies to be done how to optimize utilization of that building. I think similar to what Lynn are seeing is your head office staff do not necessarily need to be physically present all the time. There's been a very big mind shift on the management side, at least, of I don't need to have my people under my eyes 100% of the time. They do actually deliver from home, and they probably deliver better sometimes. Not having to be stuck in traffic for 90 minutes in, 90 minutes out makes a difference. They are more productive. The things that we do struggle with, and that speaks to what Jane said, is how to make sure you keep that personal connection between people. You've got staff members who's naturally just quite good at picking the phone up on a Friday afternoon and phoning their colleagues saying, hey, how are you? What are you doing? What are you up to? Others just check out. And so you need to have a balance of who to encourage to participate a bit more and who not to. And the other thing that's quite interesting that we see is across the various regions. The UK, for example, is very comfortable working with, in a dispersed model, working from home. South Africa takes a bit getting used to. It's not in the culture necessarily. Similar to our Mozambique offices, the people are incredibly sociable, really like to be in an office environment, and they feed off each other's energy. Europe is obviously a totally different kettle of fish, also quite self-sufficient and comfortable working from home. So it depends on where you are. If you're in a production operations environment, your people simply have to be there. Otherwise, you don't get your product out. But administrative services, head office services, probably less so. So I think what we see is a business model where your head office buildings will have lower occupancy rates. You will utilize the buildings differently. So no, it's a brave new world out there.
Lynn, if I could just come back to you on that, and Quibus, thanks very much. Appreciate your insights. If you guys could all just have a look at the chat, there's been some prompting there. If you could just respond accordingly with questions or whatever has been asked of you. Just looking at the way people have worked before and the certain working patterns. If you look at your head office, for example, do you think you will be on average 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days people in the office? And where do you think it will be in a year from now, assuming we are retaining a downward risk curve of COVID?
Well, we've got, I mentioned the office in Chippenham, which is actually 3 stories high. And actually could fill, I think we've had about 250 people in that building. We had the opportunity to serve a break notice on that building this year, which we've done, and we're looking to take a 1/6 of that space now into for a sort of a drop in and sort of, you know, it's going to be more of a meeting place than a building that people come to work in. So for the staff that do really want to work from an office environment, there is somewhere for them to go, and they, you know, they will be able to book a desk or whatever, but it will be hot desking, albeit in a COVID safe environment. But we are drastically reducing that office space, and obviously the cost that goes along with that. It has been something that we've spent quite a lot of time talking to the Chippenham-based colleagues about as to what they want to do, and we've found that only really 20% of people want to. Well, 20% of people want to work over 3 days a week out of an office environment. Most of our colleagues are really looking to work 1, 2 days in the office maximum. I think a lot of us have seen the benefit of being able to work from home, to get out in your lunch hour, walk the dog, you know, a little bit more like social space for your health and well-being. That's been good. But also on the other side, there's been a number of our colleagues that haven't got an office space that they can use at home, that do want to go into the office. And that's the future that we see, a bit of a sort of like a hybrid and a very flexible approach to the head office environment. Obviously, out in the business, it's most of our colleagues will be working in their operations, but we've got lots of office space around the UK at those particular locations as well. So we'll be making use of that to meet up with people. So where I said my team would be meeting at least once every 6 weeks, I think we'll start to see that with a lot of the bigger teams, and we'll start to see co-meetings. So compliance and finance may well have a team meeting together, so that you still do get that cross-fertilisation. You don't start to build up silos.
I think one of the things that we are gaining in this coming back to the real world, whatever you want to call it, is that we're having to be forced to think about communicating, whereas before it was one of those sort of passage conversations. If it happened, it happened. Whereas now we're having to actually be a bit more constructive about trying to re-engage. And some of us don't know how to. I went to the city the other day and I kept putting things down and forgetting to pick them up. Yeah, I'm not as familiar. The routine, it was not just by habit. I had to think to make sure I didn't leave my phone behind or didn't pick up my handbag or whatever it was. Jane, I want to turn to you now, please. If we could just talk about one of the things you've raised a concern about is how do organizations do appraisals, handle promotions? Obviously, there's a whole recruitment process which has occurred during this period. That has been one of the issues that has continued. But how will people be appraised? How are you going to assess whether they were working or are just very efficient in an hour to make it look like they've been working? How do people be able to put their case forward for promotion in this home working environment? How do bosses and people work together?
I think this is going to be one of the big challenges, Sharon, and also, one of the notes I've just made is about inclusiveness and not discriminating. In other words, is somebody who's not been physically and visibly seen in the office, are they earning less brownie points, if you like, than someone who is, even though it might make them more productive and suit their working style? There's going to be the sense of or the worry about discrimination and inclusiveness. And so I think what we really need is a great deal of openness. We've got to create the dialogue and the conversation and the openness around what the expectations of the organization are, around productivity, around being in the office, and around appraisals. And being clear that there isn't discrimination.
What extent was there risk of bias?
Yes,
in that
exactly.
So there isn't discrimination.
Yes, and so it's got to be something, I think, that people have got to, again, they've got to explore within themselves. Am I actually feeling less comfortable about this person because I don't see them very often, or I don't communicate very often, I don't see them in person? And how can I counter that? How can I make sure we do have more regular meetings? I do get to know that person more often. So there's just an awful lot of things we need to be thinking about now, and from my perspective, making clear decisions about, and also making sure we have conversations about. A lot of my work is about decision making. What criteria have we used to make a decision about something? Again, even with appraisals, what criteria are we using, and are we be clear about those criteria? Are they all spoken criteria, or are there some unspoken criteria? As you say, I'm using some sense of discriminating that is subconscious. So I think all of that, we've just got to be more honest with ourselves, more honest with each other. One of the organizations that I've followed for some time, and some of the audience here may be familiar with, is Ricardo Semler. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Ricardo Semler from Semco, and many years back he wrote the book called The 7-Day Weekend. And Ricardo Semler took over the company from his father and transformed his management style. And the 7-Day Weekend is really a sense in saying, I don't mind when you come into the office as long as you do your work. I don't mind if you go to the beach on a Monday, if you catch up on a Sunday, you know, it's up to you. But in doing that, in creating that culture, I create a sense of openness, but also a sense of trust, that I trust you, but you trust me. So that is a cultural thing, but building that up to a level where we can trust each other to be doing, each of us to be doing the best for the company and doing the best for ourselves takes time. You've got to create the framework for that. And I think that's the thing that many of us, you know, we've got to create that framework of trust and openness and the conversations around it. So that for me is some of my work at the moment, helping my clients to have those conversations, to create the culture, to create the framework that enables that flexibility and that inclusiveness.
One of the things that you get in relation to that is, first of all, the when they're working flexibly, is the person they need to work with doing the opposite flexibility choice to what they're doing?
Yes.
And therefore, how does the team not break down? So there
Yes.
are so many complexities. I mean, you're in it all the time. Lynn's made the comment that Wincanton provide full office equipment for the home worker. So they make it comfortable for the home worker to achieve it at home. That's where Cecil has the opposite challenges. Some of those people don't have the home working environment that you have in other parts of the world. So it does create a confusion. And Sheila's also put forward the comment that if we're going into the office one day a week or one day every 6 weeks or whatever it might be, is do we leave the technology at home and only take the human being into the office? And therefore we have to be social in that point. Or are we
Yes.
going in to prove that we're sitting at our desk?
Yes.
Another thing I've noticed companies doing is they actually monitor the activity on people's laptops and then clock that as their engagement, which is not really fair to everyone. They might be doing something that doesn't require the laptop. So I just wondered how that pans out in their environment, but quite interesting differences that we've got there. If we can just go to Lynn on your side, please. The retention of staff in the operations side of the business, so in the logistics side, where people have never been at an office, they're all working from hubs and teams and, you know, hub and spoke kind of models, and how you go through the retention of people in the main office. Because I mean, if you can imagine somebody decides they want to go and look for a job, you've got very little way of controlling how many hours they spend during that day looking for the job versus being else. How do you retain people also from a culture and enjoyment and engagement team point of view as well?
Well, I think a lot of it is around communication. You know, we do talk to our people quite a lot around, you know, making the best use of their day, not necessarily sitting at the computer all the time. Also, you know, we do run quite a number of sessions where we're thinking about well-being. So we are doing some, you know, some sessions where you just take 10 minutes out of your working day and just do a little bit of, you know, meditation. I know it sounds silly, but actually, you know, a number of people actually find that a great benefit. So there's a bit about communication, a bit about retention, a bit about, you know, balance with the work-life balance, but also about defining what the deliverables are for people, so that they understand that, you know, it's okay to do a 20-hour week one week if you're going to have to work a 40-hour week or 45-hour week the next week to get the job done. And it's quite difficult to get that into people's mindsets, that they can be flexible about that. But I think if you define what the deliverables are, they know that as long as they're delivering what you're expecting, then, you know, you can actually feel a little bit more comfortable about taking the odd afternoon out without using holiday and things like that. So I think there's a bit about, well, a lot about communication, a lot about looking after people's well-beings, and a lot about setting the deliverables. And I think that does help with retention.
Right.
Yeah, but out in the operations, it's actually quite difficult for our colleagues at the moment because they're all quite fatigued. We've been in, I mean, usually in our business, we're in peak, sort of like November, December, January time for the big grocery businesses, and other parts of the business have different peaks. But for grocers, they've been in continued peak since we've been in lockdown. So a lot of our colleagues are actually absolutely shattered. So some of it again is about recognition that, you know, somebody might actually be feeling quite low because they're just tired. So again, it's, you know, it's communication and trying to look after each other, setting those well-being sort of targets and things.
Griffith, along the same lines, in the case of Sasol, is creating that environment of, as boss, I trust you, as the senior person, and you are the more junior person, I trust you, versus people who literally are going to take the mick and the others that are going to completely overwork. What sort of experience is Sasol having in that, either in their global markets, because you're in the US as well as how it's comparing in the South African context and African continent side versus the European behavior? Because you've defined how completely different the people's environments and choices are. How does that work with the trust of flexibility of the individuals?
So I think that was the one pleasant surprise when lockdown actually commenced. Everybody just knuckled down and got on with it. And what we also realized was there's actually two types of culture that you need to accommodate. One is the company culture, the internal culture, but then your national cultures as well. So the national cultures I've spoken about, the internal culture, what happened there was the teams just got on with things. And because you're working mostly on teams, you've got perfect visibility of everybody's availability. So the calendar simply got filled. And things actually flipped over to the other side, where staff really started saying, but guys, it's absolutely crazy. We can't keep on working like this. People start scheduling meetings 7 o'clock in the morning, and we walk out of meetings 7 o'clock at night. And there's absolutely no break in between because our lunch times don't align. You've got the different time zones. So we actually have to start bringing in informal rules to say, chaps, please try and keep Friday afternoons open. Don't schedule meetings. If you do schedule a meeting, make it for 50 minutes. Don't book the full hour. If you'd been in the office, even if you had back-to-back meetings, you would have walked from one boardroom to the other, or from one meeting room to the other. So you would have had a break. You would have had a chance to debrief, catch up, get your coffee, do whatever. Working from home, it's physically not possible. People are starting to tender apologies if they're a minute late. Oh, sorry, it's 1 minute past 10. Everybody else is there. I'm late. Very decent, but you pick up a new type of culture, which is you switched on 100% of the time, and that's also not realistic. So it's something you need to manage, and I think something which, as we start reintroducing people into the office, will hopefully sort itself out. But it's something you definitely need to keep a very close eye on.
If I look at mine, I think the worst day I had was 19 meetings, and mine invariably started at 6 in the morning and finishing 7:30 at night. Yeah. And then you get some junior person in my greater lifestyle who says, but you haven't paid me. I said, well, it is only the date of the month, is it? It's like the 5th of the month. Oh, but that's what you should be doing. No, actually, when you think of the realities of life, that isn't the most important thing in my life. So it's trying to get people who are not actually that directly impacted by the COVID environment because they're in the DIY world and they've got lots of business. they don't see that others have actually had their lives impacted in a different way, and therefore prioritizing things becomes very difficult. I know Rob's got a very good question, but Rob, I'm going to ask you to actually pose your question to the panel in a moment. The aspect also that the feedback there was that the aspect of controlling the computer and the use of the computer and what the computer can be used for is very employee centric and must give you a feeling of lack of empowerment and lack of being trusted. And what are the unintended outcomes that that might bring? Maybe Jane, you've got some insights into that.
I think the word empowerment is an interesting one, Sharon, because I think, you know, people like to feel empowered. We will like to feel that we have our own agency, if you like, and the basis of all of my work as a mediator and also as a facilitator is enabling people to do what I call self-determination, to make their own choices as far as possible, bearing in mind, you know, certain criteria and other people, but actually to have their own agency, make their own choices. So I think, you know, it's important how you facilitate that. How do you enable people to make their own decisions, or at least have their own voice heard? At the same time, I think, as Cobus was saying, you know, bearing in mind, what is the culture around here? How do we do things around here? What's the national culture? So again, you know, it is this sense of balance. How do we balance these things out? One of the things I get people to think through quite clearly is, what are the criteria for making decisions? What criteria should I as an individual have in mind, and what criteria should we as an organisation have in mind? I've been very clear about what those criteria actually are, because once we know what the criteria are, then we can all make decisions using those criteria. So that can be an important job for an organisation to be doing or redoing now, is thinking, what are the criteria that we, and also the values, what are our core values around here, and what are the decision-making criteria that we use based on those values, and that it's a much clearer process to go through to make difficult decisions, either at an individual level, but once you know those, and you can then leave individuals to make important decisions because they've got a framework to make them against.
The one thing I found interesting, because I work in a global market and I'm trying to convince people that as a service industry provider, that I know what I'm doing and you must pay me money so that I can show you what I can do. But I can't evidence it to you because you're so unique and you have to trust me to engage me so that you know what I'm talking about. And the biggest challenge I had at one stage, if I go back, let's say 3 years, they'd say, no, we need to have a face-to-face meeting, and then make sure that it was quite difficult to have that face-to-face meeting. So the engagement process could take months to have a meeting, have another meeting, have a third meeting, and then get a no or a yes, whichever way it was going to go. That then went into early COVID days of, we will only have this discussion when we can get back to having meetings again. 9 months later, thinking, well, okay, certain companies then started to say, well, we're going to have to start making changes. We're going to have to start making some decisions, even though we can't do it in a face-to-face environment. It'll be interesting to see whether that phenomenon of only making certain decisions when you've eyeballed them, or whether we will have morphed into a space of being able to make business decisions without having had to have that in-person meeting. So maybe all of you can give me an opinion on that as our last question, and then we'll open to the floor. Lynn, do you want to give us your feedback on that first?
That's actually interesting, because obviously with our customers, we have been doing the face-to-face meetings, and where we've had contract discussions, they have mostly been face-to-face. But if you take that then into sort of my world a little bit more, where I'm not so customer facing, we've changed certain suppliers through the COVID lockdown period, and we've done that on the basis of Teams meetings. So, you know, rather than, you know, getting around a table and doing a presentation, for example, our registrars, we changed our registrars through the lockdown period. So, you know, we got the same sort of input that we would have ordinarily had face to face. You know, we had presentations, we had the people sitting on the Teams call where they could answer the questions for us, and we made decisions based on what we could see. Okay, it's slightly different because you can't build that face-to-face rapport, but on the basis that we're both mostly going to be connecting electronically going forward, does it really matter? So I think, you know, you've got to adapt, haven't you, depending on the environment. So I think we've done a pretty good job at doing that over the last 12, 18 months.
Wonderful. Grubers, how have your guys and teams gone with the decision-making process? Because part of some of the attributes I was describing was typically how the South African market responded.
I think they adapted very well and very rapidly. I guess if you're just a oversized engineering firm, everybody prides themselves on being very tech savvy. So the adoption of Teams, for example, or previously Zoom or similar types of technology was adopted very quickly, and it worked very, very well. And I think because the company is fairly widely dispersed geographically, there was already a culture of working across borders. So that really helped your executive management already sits in the States, in Europe, in South Africa, in the UK. So they just pretty much carried on as per normal. And office-based people got used to working on Teams also very quickly. I think where there were much more thinking to be done was on the productions operations and the distribution side. How did you deal with a scenario if you really had a spike of COVID related illnesses in an office or in a factory? What did you do? Could you pretty much close down that one particular unit or just stabilize it for a bit, keep it separate from the rest? So you had to do some creative thinking there, but by and large, the decentralized way of working was adopted fairly easily. But again, I think it speaks to the internal culture of what the company had before COVID struck. There was that flexibility and the ability to flip over quite quickly.
Far less of this traveling and carbon footprint to have a meeting. I mean, the amount I used to travel to South Africa every 2 months for a week, and I've probably had better quality meetings once that market finally engaged. Yeah. Now that I don't have to travel around the country. I mean, I was getting up every morning in Johannesburg, flying to Durban, next day flying from Johannesburg to Port Elizabeth, then the next day flying from Johannesburg to Cape Town. It was a killer. How can you be productive? Yeah. It's far better this way. Anyway, Jane, do you want to give us your view on this one?
Absolutely. So at the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, where I've been chair of the board of management for about 4 years, I'm actually just stepping down because I'm about to become president, but we always used to fly people in for our board meetings. So international board meetings, people would come in from all over the world, typically from the United States, from Asia, from wherever the board members were. So we've been used to doing that, and we've gone immediately. Sometimes people would dial in, but that was normal face-to-face board meetings at least twice a year. So we have had
expected to be there.
Expected to be there, expected to go to dinner, and so a big thing, very, very, very valuable actually to connect with people. And I think we will go back to doing that at least once a year. But then you consider the actual cost of flying people business class, from all the hotel expenses, meals, everything. The saving on the budget is enormous. So that creates another tension, doesn't it? You know, how often should we meet face to face versus, you know, the cost of that. But in terms of decision making, I think, again, it's been perfectly possible to run those board meetings on Zoom and make decisions, just creating, you know, the right process, being able to, one of the challenges for me, both as a mediator and chair of a board, is it's very different with people here to make than it is in the room, to make sure that everybody has a voice. It's one of the very important things for me as a mediator and chair of a board is, how do I enable people to be heard and listened to and make sure they have a voice? And that's always, sometimes the most silent people have the best ideas. They just haven't found the way to, verbalize them or found the confidence to speak up or whatever. And that's always an important role when you're facilitating a meeting. And it's different in this environment that you're looking for different signs, different clues that someone hasn't spoken yet, or they haven't said exactly what they're thinking or feeling. And I'm often looking for body language in an in-person meeting, and I have to look for different signs or perhaps use different techniques to make sure everybody's had an opportunity to have their say, or perhaps some people are saying too much and perhaps I need to, manage that as well. So I think those are some of the challenges for me in terms of decision making and enabling everybody to contribute.
We can direct message or WhatsApp or Teams text
Exactly.
to people saying, enough now,
yes,
stop. Somebody else needs their say.
And you've got to be looking for somebody who, waving their hand or putting their virtual hand up.
Exactly.
And again, sometimes people won't even do that.
Won't
So
do that, no. One
got
of
to
my
say,
strongest directors of a board of which I'm chair is the most silent. And
yes,
every time I have to call him into the meeting to give his opinion, which is always
yes,
the best.
yes,
But he won't do it. And yet he's a chair
yes,
of
yes,
a massive international company. I think
yeah,
that doesn't make sense.
yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to pass on to Rob to ask a question. And Sheila, you've put a couple of points up as well. So if I could turn to Rob, then to Sheila, and then we're open to the floor.
I think mine's more observations and a question. I've observed that many of the people I work with or I know who are working, who went into lockdown, ended up not having that work-life balance. And even though they've got a workspace in their home, and it's a dedicated space, they found that they were working much longer hours, and they tied in the travel time and the rest of it. But they were ended up, the more they gave, the more that was wanted from them. And it got to a point where they were having, issues in regards to being able to switch off, and especially organizations where offices are in different time zones. That is a problem. So what can employers do to manage this? Because on the one hand, you want to be more productive. On the other hand, there's the fiduciary duty and the humanity side, that you shouldn't be expecting people to work every single hour. And there has to be some communication from the top that says, how do we engage you and make you productive, but at the same time, make sure that you've got some boundaries, and whether we set those or you set those. So for the panel, in a 30-second answer, what do you think could possibly be the solution for organizations? I know Lynn has mentioned at least 3 or 4 times, maybe more, communication, and many companies just haven't properly or sufficiently communicated to employees.
Shall I go first, Rob? Because I think we haven't cracked that communication yet, because there's always more you can do on the communication front, I think. But we have actually set some protocols around, no meetings before 8 o'clock in the morning, try to avoid anything after 6 o'clock, and keep 12:30 to 1:30 clear every day of meetings where you can. Obviously there are some things that just have to go in, but we set some standards there. And I think somebody else mentioned this as well. Friday afternoon is always the time that we try to keep clear, to clear the emails down from the week, and just get yourself in a little bit of a cleaner space before you go into the weekend. Like I said, it doesn't always happen, but if you've got some boundaries that you've set around that. Now we thought we'd got this message down into the business, but actually we've been doing it as an exec team. Our senior management group that sits below us has been doing that as well, it's not quite got further down into the business. So like I said, we just haven't cracked that communication yet, but we've just got to keep banging on about it. But I think setting some sort of boundaries is important. And it's easier for us because we're not international. So, you know, we are
an organisation that's international, and they've worked on no meetings on Friday for everybody. Completely. Fridays are bad. You can't. Jane, and then Quibus, and then we'll come back to Sheila. And then Fiona, I'd like to hear from you as to how Citibank are doing it. So if we can go through that cycle, and then we're overrunning. I'll then give Robert opportunity to do the formal close, then we'll carry on chatting.
I just so empathise with that, because I have found myself, even though I'm used to working from home, not having to travel, you do just allocate that time to another meeting. You sort of find you have filled your travel time with meetings. So it's just terribly easy to do. And I think that sense that we all need to remind ourselves and have some kind of framework, or, you know, we've got to look after each other. Actually, I think it is about looking after each other, having each other's back, and reminding people. And again, it comes back to values. I was working with an organization yesterday, and the core value they wanted to come up with now was balance. They said this is to be the one thing that we want to put at the heart of, you know, reminding everybody it's about balance. And I liked that a lot. So, you know, I think what's the one thing we'd like people to have in mind at this time, whatever it is, and then make that the sort of foundation around which you build things.
Quibus, you've made a comment as well on the chat around the internal approvals authorities. Do you want to respond to that and to Rob's observations, so I can then move to Sheila?
Yeah, so the internal approvals process was part I think part good luck. It was a process that we've been reviewing in any event. There's always been the complaint in a large international organization, you need to avoid decision making by committee. It takes too long, it's too cumbersome, and so ever since 2015, we've been trying to adopt a more US orientated single point accountability approval system, where you will have one decision maker and then one or two other key people who either needs to agree or needs to give input, that type of thing. And I think lockdown just forced us to really apply that system. And again, using technology, stuff like signing up or PDF, you upload the document, you've got the minimum number of approvers on there, you've done your socialization of the decision beforehand, and off it goes. And we found that actually speeded up decision making quite well. Again, you just need to make sure that you do your socialization very well in advance. So otherwise you can get stuck quite quickly.
Sheila, do you want to just add your observation that you were covering earlier?
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, everybody. Really interesting conversation. We could go on about this one, I'm sure, for a very long time this evening. It's just so lovely to see you again, Jane. Yeah, the observation there was, I mean, it's only actually this week that our offices have fully started to open in the UK. So I've not yet been back into our office in Manchester. London used to be there every week. Hopefully we'll get back there at some point. But I suppose the point was that actually I've started to think about myself and with my own team, as we do start to come back into the office, actually what are we using the office for? And are we just going to all go back, as you were saying, Sharon, with our technology, and we actually just accidentally all sit at the desk all day on a laptop, which we can do probably better and more effectively at home. So it's kind of just thinking of what we're using the office for. And I'm getting to the point where I'm thinking that I may go in with my phone, so I can still do emails and all the essential stuff, but actually it's there to make the connections, to take the whatever we're working on to the next stage and so on. And I think certainly for the type of organization we are, it's making those wider connections that you're really, really missing in all of this. I think we can do so much of it online, and actually we were already using Teams and so on about a year, 18 months before this all happened. So actually it's just extended and expanded how we were using it, and it has enabled us to be, I think, more inclusive. But it's really interesting what you were saying, Cobus, about making sure that you've got the right people in the room and not too many people in the room when you're making decisions now. And I think that's quite an interesting one. And I think going back to the office, and I can already begin to see it where we have got people going back into the office, and meetings are now a combination of a group of colleagues in a room and colleagues still around the regions online, how you actually work that to ensure that there is still equity and inclusion. So I think all those dimensions of equity, inclusion, and making sure that we keep the gains that we have is going to be really, really interesting as we move into the hybrid, which I think is going to be much more complex for many of us to operate and to work effectively as we learn through it again in the next
another set of learning. Fiona and I were in a meeting together recently. It was the first hybrid meeting that committee was having, and it was hysterically dysfunctional. In the end, people all wandered off into offices with their laptops, gave up on the common room, and we all went back to a remote Zoom style meeting, and everybody was in their own place, except two of them went into one office and used one computer. But Fiona, I'm just curious to hear from you before we close. Where's Citibank on your strategy in Canary Wharf?
Well, I mean, where do you want me to start? We've covered so much.
Should we do Rob's close first? Carry on, Fiona.
We've covered so much. I mean, okay, so I like to be a little bit more controversial as well. So I will deliberately plant some provocative statements in here. I'm not a bad person, okay, guys? So I work at Citi, massive international bank, you know, in well over 100 countries, 160. I lose track, right? We're just everywhere. We have 250,000 staff permanent. That means we've probably got oodles more on contract and association. So you get the size of scale. I'm just a tiny little microcosm, you know, in part of that in London. So I mean, Citi never stopped. I mean, it's an international bank. It's got critical services. Whilst at the moment we're into banker bashing, the media is into banker bashing, we're all bad people. Quite frankly, I was so proud of Citi, and we're not the only bank, but Citi stepped in, didn't step down, didn't stop. It actually basically relocated wholesale much of its workforce to a different place. It didn't stop working, it didn't work differently. It just did it in a different place. And you could sort of say, well, that's what we do, right? We work in lots of different places. So there were some hot spots where, you know, people just simply didn't have the infrastructure in some poor places in India. You know, some people didn't even have the money to heat their homes. I mean, because that's, you know, so we had to step into a few places. But I was really proud, but not got carried away. And I was one who said, you know, at certain fora, you know, let's not get carried away. Let's, you know, all we've done, it was, you know, all we've done is work in a different location. This is not about operation. Nothing's crashed. We've just managed to do what we do in a different place. It did give rise to some highlights, some certain issues, and we got through those within a few weeks, actually. So, and actually, Citi stepped in to, you know, helping financial advise and adding the infrastructure for Gavi, which is the charity that's distributing the COVID vaccines around the world. Hugely proud of Citi's, you know, voluntary contribution on that network. So, you know, we stepped up as well, whichever metaphor you want to use. So this notion of, I'm grateful. I feel grateful to have had a job, and I remind my colleagues and most of my people I work with, you know, we recognise that we are grateful to have a job that has kept us employed, because that hasn't been the case for everyone. So it's a case of reflecting. And Citi, you know, there are ugly, nasty parts of Citi. We're an investment bank, right? And there's people earning huge amounts of money, and that's all that matters. But the vast majority of people are just office workers in a bank, right, or management. You know, I for one am grateful that I was kept employed. I recognise everything you said. We've all moved to Zoom, and I've learned how to use it. So what we have think are digital. We were always talking about new transformation, innovation, digital technology, the new world, how the UK was going to compete with New York, blah blah blah. And I think COVID. I'm a glass half full person. COVID has accelerated our technological abilities and our imagination of what we could get to. So it's good in that sense. Now, let me get to the other bit, right? So what really sort of started to bug me a bit, every time I come on calls like this, everyone's talking about what staff want. Now, I'm going to provoke Jane here a bit because I know you're a mediation, right? But, you know, since when did big commercial organisations, capitalistic commercial organisations, ever ask what staff want beyond a good firm's consultation process, etc.? So suddenly, COVID has turned everybody into caring, sharing people, most concerned about what each and every single person would like and what colour cushion they want to sit on and how comfortable. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. You know, we are, the employer sets the contract. It has to be a fair one. I'm not talking about, you know, the employer sets the contract, the terms of work and the salary you get. The employer has the right, it's their business. If I act like an owner, I have the right to make a choice. Every individual has a right. They have a choice. They don't have to work here, right? Do you get what I mean? So as long as you're reasonable. So where did this line come from? It's that we have to ask everyone what they want. Well, when have we ever done that? We have consultations, but when have we
pick that up as in the after? I'd love to actually have that conversation, but maybe let's just give Rob 2-3 minutes, Rob, just to close, so people feel if they want to drop off that they haven't been rude, and then let's open it to the floor because I'm sure there's some a response to Fiona's challenge available out there.
I'll even give a slight response myself, but thank you very much, panel members. It's been great having you with us. Thank you to the audience. I will close with some comments and just rounding up some of the thoughts that have been put on the table, and then we'll formally close the Zoom session, but we'll continue on for another 10-15 minutes to allow informal conversation and dialogue and having converging and diverging comments, because I think it's always great to have someone in the room or a couple of people in the room. And sometimes I like to be the troublemaker, but today it's Fiona. So thank you. You saved me a job there, Fiona. My thoughts on COVID going back to the office, I agree and I slightly disagree with Fiona in the fact that the workplace has changed. Yes, there still is an employment contract. Employers have to employ people to do jobs on the one hand. On the other hand, COVID has given a chance for people to reflect. And I think when people reflect, they're able to prioritize. And when they prioritize, they actually say, why have I been going a certain way? I've done that all my life. Now I've actually had a chance to say, do I need to do that? And one of the things that I believe that we'll see in the next 6 to 12 months is a lot of people becoming self-employed, leaving their jobs, and employers, whether they're large banks or manufacturing or logistics, it very much well could come to a point where they're struggling to get enough people, whether remote or in the office, to do the jobs that they need, unless they become an employer of choice that is more inclusive, that allows flexible working hours, that embraces people working different office hours. And so COVID's been good, COVID's been bad. For me, I'm a business owner. I do a lot of consulting. I've had to get used to wearing one of these. And when I travel internationally, which I've had to do, I sometimes wear one of these as well, which is the most ridiculous thing to have to do. So I would be very pleased not to have to worry about wearing a mask or a face screen or anything else. I think we're all looking forward to the pandemic ending. It's very likely it will be an endemic, which means it will be here to stay. So one way or the other, as employees, as employers, as business owners, as people that run business, we have to find a way. And I agree with the comments that have come up around the whole aspect of trying to find better ways of working. Jane talked about having a framework. Kubus mentioned about internal controls. Lynn talked about communication. Sharon talked about, do we really need to travel across the world? Can't we have face-to-face? Do we need to have face-to-face meetings when I have to travel an hour and a half to have an hour's meeting and an hour and a half to get back from that hour's meeting? So I think as in whichever capacity you are, there's something for us to take away. Fiona mentioned about the digital transformation. Many of the big consulting firms, all of the big four, and I was working with one organization, one of the big four said that the digital roadmap was at least 2 to 3 years. COVID has proven that the big consultants that were telling people that you can't do this unless you do that and you must follow these steps. No, when there's necessity, we are adaptable, and that's the beauty of us. And that, you know, we need to appreciate that there are differences in the office, and there's always going to be conflict. There's always going to be disgruntled employees. There's always going to be ruthless employers, whatever happens. And we just have to manage it in the best way that we can and think about outputs and what are our core values. Because ultimately, organizations need a purpose. Culture is based on the vision, the mission, and that purpose, and just meeting the goals. Ultimately, anything that's a commercial business has to make money for their investors and make money to continue on. If they don't do that, and they will go out of business. And commercial entities are different from charitable entities and trusts and foundations. But at the same time, it all requires people. And I think COVID has reminded us that people aren't just a number. They are really adding value in one way, shape, or form. Do we need to be in the office? Maybe. Do we need to be in the office 5 days a week? Probably not. Many organizations have gone to working from home as their model. The people that own properties and want to lease them to businesses, they're going to have to rethink how they utilize the space that they own. Offices that manage and rent out office space for meetings and other facilities, they're going to have to rethink their business model. So I think COVID has made many people think, let's look to the future. We can plan ahead, and we now start needing to understand what the emerging risks are. And so far today, we haven't really talked about risk. And when we think about risk, if we go to the whole digitalization and we talk about the banking industry in particular, and we talk about finance with organizations, at this point, during downturns, there's always a high risk of accounting fraud. There's a high risk of fraud in general. And if everything's being submitted digitally and not verified by somebody, ultimately there is a potential of risk. So it's been a pleasure speaking to you all, and hopefully you'll stay with us for the rest of the time. Thank you.
Apologies. Thanks very much.